So, welcome to this workshop on how to create a simple online survey experiment. I am Nils Holmberg and I work at Strategic Communication at Lund University. And I have developed the contents of this workshop together with my colleague, Malin Sillinger, at the Department of Service Management. And the background to this workshop is that we think there is a need for some simple tools to build an experiment that is also free of charge. So we know that there are some tools that cost you money, but we would like to do this without any licensing fees and so on. So on this presentation, on this workshop, I will start with showing you a couple of slides. And then we will do a hands-on session where we try to create an online experiment using Google Documents. So the whole workshop basically consists of these two steps. We will create the survey experiment, and then we will also analyze some experiment data. So, for example, if you run an experiment, you have a control condition, and you collect data on the control condition, and you have a treatment condition where you collect some data. And then at the end, you want to compare means, for example, between these two conditions. So we will basically dedicate most of this workshop to the first part, creating a survey experiment. And doing an experiment is a lot of work in all the different stages. And it's really important to do your literature review, to really investigate previous research that is connected to the kind of experiment that you want to run, because this will help you find out what has been done before and how you can contribute something new. And you can also formulate hypotheses about your expected results. And this is the first step. And when you have done the first step, you can go on to actually design the experiment and decide what will be your measurements. What are you going to measure in your experiment? And you can also decide the different conditions where you will do your measurements. So, for example, a control condition and a treatment condition. And this is often called an A/B test. So a typical example is in advertising, you wanted to test out which version of two online adverts that performs the best. So there's a lot of stuff to cover when you do an experiment, and we will only jump into the practical stuff here. So to provide some context for this experiment workshop, we need some kind of research question. And the research question in this case is, how can we improve online banner advertising or display advertising? I think you have all seen these banner adverts on various different platforms online. For example, if you go to an online newspaper, you will often see banner adverts in the right column to the far right of the screen. Or if you go to YouTube, you will see banner adverts or display adverts. And also if you scroll on your social media, on Instagram or on Facebook, you will also see these banner adverts. And previous research has shown that these types of adverts, which you can see in the background here, an example, they are very good at generating awareness. So if you do a marketing campaign and you show a lot of people these banner adverts, you can increase people's awareness about a certain product. For example, this brand of mobile phone. But so we know this from previous research. But here the research question is, how can we improve banner advertising even further? So maybe we can manipulate existing banner advertising to perform even better when it comes to not only generating awareness, but also generating interest and generating positive attitudes for a product. So then we are talking about consideration in marketing terms. So the research question is, how can we develop banner advertising, display advertising, to not only generate awareness, but also generate more interest, more positive attitudes. So we take the research question and we create a hypothesis based on the research question. And here it is, of course, important to go back to previous research and see what has been done before. But let's pretend that we have done this research and we have found out that there is a good chance that adding people, images of people in the banner advert will cause more positive attitudes. So by just adding a picture of a face in a banner advert, we think that we can generate more positive attitudes. That's going to be the hypothesis. So the next step is to create a survey experiment. And survey experiments are, they try to have the best of two worlds, basically. So a good thing with surveys is that you can do these online. You can collect your data or your observations by sending out a link, and it is easy to get your responses through various web services. And surveys are also good when it comes to measuring attitudes. It's quite difficult to look at people's behavior and draw conclusions about their attitudes. So it's basically a better approach to ask them to rate their attitudes about something. So that's positive things about surveys. But on the negative side, on the minus side, we have to say that these survey data are self-reported. So that means that they are subjective to the participant. If a participant is not able to answer a question, or if they decide to give a bogus answer, we will basically get noise in our data. So there are positive things and negative things with surveys. And survey experiments is trying to combine these surveys with an experimental approach. And the good thing with experiments is that we can have these different conditions. We can have a control condition and a treatment condition, which allows us to talk about the causal effect of the treatment. And another important principle in experiments is that you can have this random assignment. So you basically show some stimulus, maybe a banner advert, to two groups of people, and then you try to measure what kind of difference you have in the responses between these two groups. So in the second part of this workshop, we will also try to analyze the data that is generated in an experiment. And the analysis is basically trying to answer a question: how strong support do our data provide for the hypothesis? So we know that we can never be 100% sure in science. And the best thing we can do is to try to find out what is the likelihood that our results are due to random effects as opposed to the conditions that we have in our experiment. And this is what we will do when we try to analyze the results. And when we analyze survey data and also experiment data, we always start with descriptive analyses. So for example, let's say that we want to measure attitudes in two different conditions. So we have a control condition, which is here shown with the orange color, and we have a treatment condition. So the first thing we do when we analyze our data is to descriptively find out differences when it comes to mean values, the averages in these two conditions. And maybe we hope to find something like this. This is almost exactly what we stated in the hypothesis, that when we have a control condition, we have slightly lower attitudes on average. And when we add the picture of a face of a person in our banner advert, we will generate a little bit better attitudes. So this is the descriptive part, and we will do this using Google Documents. And the final part is to try to figure out if there is a chance that our results are due to random variation or if it is a systematic variation. And when we do this, we basically go one step further from comparing means, and we try to find out if our two conditions actually constitute two different distributions. So you can see these distributions here in the figure. And in this case, we have one distribution that is orange and one distribution that is blue, which is the treatment. And if these distributions are sufficiently different, we will say to ourselves that we think we have found good evidence, good support for our hypotheses. So that was the intro to this workshop. So now we're going to do the hands-on part. And for this, we need to go to Google Documents, and you will see in the video description below, we will have some links to the actual experiment, but also to the files that we will work with. So if you click the link to the Google Documents, you will find something that looks like this. These files I have shared on Google Documents or Google Drive. And we can just have a look at what these different files are. So first of all, we have a data file. This is actually what we're going to do in the last part of the workshop. This is the data we need to do some data analysis. So we can leave that for now. The next one is interesting because it's a form, a Google form. And we're going to use the Google form functionality to present our stimuli and to collect our responses in this survey experiment. Next up is another type of file, which is called a Google App script. So this file contains the experiment logic. And the only thing this file will do is that it will randomly assign participants to the control condition or the treatment condition. So we will have a look at that in a moment. And then we have a spreadsheet, a Google sheet, and this document will collect the responses that we get from the forms that we put in our experiment. And finally, we have 2 images. And these are the stimuli that we will present in the experiment. So we have a control condition, that's the C image, and we have a treatment condition denoted with a T. So when we put these files together and link them up, we will have created an A/B experiment, an online survey experiment. So let's see what we need to do. So first of all, we need to have, we can open the form. So this says that it's a form and it's the A part, the control condition. And if we open it, it will look like this. So here you can probably recognize it's a Google form. And what we have done here is that we have a form question that contains an image. And this is the banner advert that we use for our control condition. So this is a typical standard online display advert with no extra fancy stuff. And below we have the response scale. So here we can rate our attitude towards this product on a scale from 1, which is strongly negative, to 7, which is strongly positive. So, and then there are also some background questions when we actually look at this form. So the first thing we need to do to be able to work with these files is that we need to copy them to our own Google Drive. So right now, when you open this link, you can probably see under owner that I am the owner of all these files. And that means that you cannot edit them. So the first thing we will do is I will just click and drag to select all the files, and then I will make a copy of these files that I can work with. So I'm going to right-click on all these files that I have selected, and I'm going to make a copy. And now Google Drive is copying these 6 files from the shared folder to my own Google Drive. And where did they go? They should end up here under my drive. So here I have my copies. And to make things a little bit more organized, I will just select all of them and put them in a separate folder. So now all my experiment files is living in this folder on my drive. And now I can edit these because now the owner has changed. So now I can do whatever I want with these copies. So if I go ahead and open the form again, you will see that now I can edit all the stuff. So now I can start changing the text here or the images over here, the response scale, the background questions. And the first thing we need to do is to create an exact copy of this form where we can present our treatment condition. So we can see here, we have a banner advert with nothing more. Our hypothesis is that if we add an image of a face here, a person, we will generate more positive attitudes compared to this condition. So the first thing we do is that we make a copy of this form. And you can right-click on it, and you can create a copy. And now you have a copy of a copy. I will go ahead and actually change the name on this one. So I will call this the B form. So this is the first part. You need to have these two different Google Forms that will be the basis of your experiment. So this one was already in the files. And this one I created now by copying the first one. So let's go ahead and open the second one, the treatment condition. And here we have the same thing that we just looked at. And that's good, because we only want to change one thing in the experiment in order to be able to say that it was actually only this thing that caused a difference in attitudes. So here we can select this image and we can substitute it for a different image. So you can do this by clicking the image and then clicking this icon. And in this case, I provided the second stimulus or the second banner advert that we will use as the treatment, and it's in my Google Drive. And it's also in my experiment folder. And it's right beside the first one. So here I have my treatment condition, which is a banner advert where we have manipulated it to contain a face as well. So you can just go ahead and click it and insert it into the Google form. And now I basically have my two conditions. So the only thing that is different between these two forms is that I have now a banner advert with a person in it. And this is very important in order to be able to say later on when I analyze the results that it is actually this change that caused an effect. Okay, so next step. Now we have two forms, but what happens with our data? We need to link these forms to a spreadsheet that will collect all the responses. So I go back to my control condition, my control form. And now I will use a button up here, which is called send. And by the way, of course, it is important that you are logged into your Google account when you do this workshop, in case I forgot to tell you before. So right now we're going to use this send button. Sorry, I actually, I'm one step ahead here. So we are actually going to figure out how to take care of the responses first. And the responses are over here on this tab on the form. So again, I'm in my control form and I want to tell Google Documents what is going to happen with my responses. So now I need to point to a Google spreadsheet, and I will use these three dots in the top right corner to select a response destination. And in this case, I will use an existing spreadsheet. So you can go ahead and click this radio button, and then we should be good to go. And then Google Document asks me what spreadsheet I would like to put my responses in. And in this case, I know that I copied all my experiment files, so all of them has something to do with copy in the file name. So it's this one in my case. So I click it and select it. Okay, now I have connected one of the forms to my response spreadsheet. So now I need to do the exact same thing for the treatment condition. So this is the treatment. Here we have manipulated the advert and we have added a phase. And now we need to tell Google Documents what is going to happen with these responses. So again, I go to the Responses tab, click the three buttons, the three dots, and I select a response destination, which is going to be the same, an existing spreadsheet, and it's called copy in the file name. So I can select it. And now I have linked both of the forms to my spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet we are talking about here is this one. This is going to be the location of the data we collect. So we can go ahead and open it to see what has happened here. And if we have done everything according to the instructions here, we should now have two different sheets or tabs in the spreadsheet. So I know that the form responses 1 will contain the data for my control condition, the banner advert with no manipulation, and the form responses 2 will contain the data for my treatment condition. So now the responses will end up in this Google Sheet. Okay, so now we're going to go one step further, and we're going to actually start working with this file, which contains the experiment logic. So this will provide a landing page for our experiment. And we will also create a link that participants will use in order to get to the experiment and to the experiment landing page. So you can go ahead and double click this one. And now you should see that it opens an app script project. And this means that we have a number of files here in the file view. And the first file that opens is this one called code.js, Google script. And we won't be doing a lot of coding here, so we can basically leave everything as it is. I just want to point out that this small snippet of code is what is going to do our randomization. So this will just point 50% of our visitors to one condition and 50% to the other condition. We can have a look at the second file, which is called index.html. So this will be the landing page of our experiment. And here we can provide some information to our participants. So here it says, welcome to the study. And here we can give some instructions that they should maybe be in a calm or secluded area when they respond to the experiment. And if we go to the next file, it's called condition.a.html. So if you click that, you will see a file that looks like this. It's basically an HTML file, but over here at this line, it is a comment. And this is where we will embed our Google Forms. So we will actually paste in a small snippet of code that will embed our Google Forms into these HTML pages. So this is what we're going to do now. So I look at my tabs, my Google documents, and I look for the one that is my A condition, my A variant. The A variant is also the control condition. So this is the banner advert with no manipulation. And now I'm going to use this send button to be able to embed this form into the experiment web application. So if you click on send, you get some different options. And in this case, we will use this tag symbol to generate a small HTML snippet that will embed our form into a web page. So you can just go ahead and click in this long link, and you can click copy. So now I have the address to my form, and I want to take this address to this Google App script. So if you look at the page I have selected, the HTML file, it's condition A. So this is where we paste in the control condition. So this generates an iframe element in the Google in the document, in the HTML document. And now it's a good idea to save the project. So this is the only thing we need to actually do manually. And if you go to the second condition, which is called condition b.html, you have a similar empty line. And now we're going to do the exact same thing with the Google form that is called B, which is the treatment condition. So here we have an image, which is a Google advert with a face of a human. And now I'm going to use the send button again. I'm going to the tag symbol, which will give me this iframe tag that I can copy. And I can then put it into my second HTML file, the condition B. And again, make sure to save this. So now we have all the files linked together. We have the forms, and the forms are linked to a response sheet, a spreadsheet to collect the data. And the web app has been linked up with the Google Forms. So the final thing to do in order to make this experiment ready for participants is to deploy it. So this is the blue button over here. and I can make a new deployment. And we have a few different fields here. The first one, make sure that it says web app over here. So basically this survey experiment is going to be a small web app. And here you can just write a description for your deployment. And in the second field, you need to make sure that it says execute as the user accessing the web app. So this will make sure that anyone that gets your experiment link will be able to use the experiment link and submit their responses on your form. And we also need to make sure that who has access is anyone with a Google account. So the only restriction here is that you will need to have a Google account in order to participate in this experiment. So make sure you have these values filled in, and then you can hit deploy. And this will generate two different links. We don't need to bother about the first link, but the second one, which says web app URL, is the link that we are going to send out to our potential participants. So this is the link that you would, for example, share on your social media to anyone that you want to be able to submit the response. So I'm going to copy this one. And finally, if everything works, we should be able to paste it in a browser and generate an experiment. I guess it takes a while for Google Documents to process the whole thing. But this is what you should be able to see now. And this means that you have recreated the experiment that you participated in earlier. So here we have the same standard formulations, and we have this button that will tell me, that will randomly assign each visitor to this web page to two different versions. So let's see, if I click the button, will I get the control condition with no face, or will I get the treatment condition with a face? So in this case, I got the treatment. And if I go back to the same page, again, to the landing page and reload it, I will sooner or later end up with the control condition, which is the other version of this banner advert. Okay, that is the whole experiment. So just to finish this workshop, we will also have a look at some data from an experiment so that we know how to analyze it. And for this part, we need to go to our copy of the data file, and it's called .tsv, which means tab separated values. So this is basically a text file which contains spreadsheet data. So you can go ahead and double click this file, and it will give you a preview, but it will also give you the option to open the file so we can edit it. So I go ahead and select Google Sheets. So now I will convert the data file to a standard Google spreadsheet. And here we have some sample data. So if we look at the columns, we have a timestamp column. We're not going to use that now. We have an attitude column. This is our dependent variable. This is what we are measuring in our forms. So it's an attitude score between 1, which is strongly negative, and 7, which is strongly positive. And then we have a column for condition. So this is going to be our main independent variable. So we want to basically see what effect does condition have on attitude. And then we also have some background variables, age and gender. And we're not going to use them for this analysis. So let's see, how can we start analyzing this? So condition, I should say, under this column, we have a C for control. So it's a shorthand for control. And if we scroll down, we can see that we also have a bunch of responses in the treatment condition, which is the T character. And if we scroll all the way down to the file, to the bottom of the file, we can see that we have exactly 100 responses for this experiment. So, like I said before, it's important that we start with our descriptive statistics when we explore the data. So we want to compare means. We want to compare the mean attitude in the control condition with the mean attitude in the treatment condition. And in Google Forms, you can just put your cursor anywhere in the data, and then you can choose Insert, Pivot Table. And this will allow us to give us a descriptive analysis. So right now, it asks us if we want to create a new sheet. And I think that is the best alternative. So new sheet and create. And now we have a new tab down at the bottom called Pivot Table. And we have an empty pivot table. And what I need to do now is that I need to look at the right-hand side, the bar where it says values. And here we need to add the dependent variable, the attitude variable. So this gives me the sum. If we sum up all the attitude scores, we get a number for that. But I don't want the sum, I want the average. And if you choose average here, we get the overall mean attitude towards the banner adverts, both of them. And the mean attitude is 3.46, so just below the middle point on a 7 degree scale. So now I want to separate the two conditions. So I go to columns and I click add. And here I select condition. So now we have a pivot table where we can see the mean attitude in the control condition, which is C, and in the treatment condition, which is T. And we can see here that it actually seems to support our hypothesis that we have a slightly higher level of attitude, positive attitude in the treatment condition. So that seems good. That's a good sign. But we still can't really say too much about these means because they could be due to random variation. So we're going to go ahead and just graph this. So to graph this, I select these 4 different cells: control, C, treatment, T, and then the mean values. And now I can select insert chart. And for some reason, Google Document thinks that I always want a pie chart, but we can also change this to a bar chart. And now we have visualized the mean values in our 2 different groups. So we have the average of attitude in the control condition and the treatment condition. And if we want to go one step further, we can customize this graph and put some indication of the confidence we have in these 2 different means. So I can scroll down on the customize and put error bars in this bar chart. And as a rule of thumb, we can say that if these error bars, the top part of this error bar does not overlap with the bottom part of this error bar, we may have a significant difference between these 2 groups. But let's do the whole analysis, and we will do some inferential analysis by using a test called a t-test. So here I go back to my data view. So this is a good indication that there might be something going on with the attitudes in our 2 different banner advert conditions. And we can actually find out what is called a p-value in Google spreadsheets. So to do this, we need to enter a formula. And the formula for this is simply the equal sign, which is the start point of all formulas. And then we hit t.test. And here I can just click tab key to autocomplete the formula. And now the formula asks me for 2 ranges, and these are the conditions I want to compare. So now I can use my arrow key and go to these attitude values. So I want to compare all the attitudes in this C condition, control condition. So if I go down to the middle of the data file, I can see that all these attitudes are connected, associated with the control condition. So here I can enter a comma sign to be able to select the next range. And this will be all the attitudes associated with the treatment. So I just go ahead and mark all of these. And now we are at the bottom of the data file. And now we can hit, so now we have the 2 ranges. Now we use the comma sign again to have the 3rd argument of this function. So now it asks me for the tails. And this is going to be a long explanation if I run through all of it, but here you can enter 2. And then comma again. And now it asks for the type. So in this case, it's a independent samples t-test. And you use the number 2 again to do this type of test. And then you have a closing parentheses. And I hit enter. And here I have the p-value. So the p-value in this experiment tells me that it is below 0.05, which is the conventional cutoff point, where I think that the effect I see in my data, there's only a 5% chance that it's due to random noise. And it's a 95% chance that it is due to this manipulation, the control condition, which was no face in the banner advert, and the treatment condition, which was with a face in the advert. So there is a strong likelihood that faces generates more positive attitudes. And that's a good thing to be able to report in a thesis or a journal article.